discussing how you will produce what you need using things locally grown, locally available, I should say. He's going to be talking a little bit on permaculture design, maybe some regenerative principles, and you can catch him tomorrow doing a workshop on DIY pesticides and mold control. So there are spots just outside of here, Lana Botanical. And without further ado, I will introduce, Mr. Mischa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. So my name is Mischa. I'm originally from California. I was working in the cannabis industry for 14 years in California, the medical and recreational industry there, before moving to Thailand. And so I studied ethnobotany in university, and that kind of gave me my background of how to interact with the plant and how to work, with the plant to get the best results. So if you look at market trends these days, you're looking at strains that are kind of being bred more towards high THC. And we have these extremely potent strains that get people high, but and that's not necessarily what we're looking for, or maybe the approach that we should be taking. As we're breeding towards things like high THC, we actually breed away from things like our terpenes or other kind of cannabinoid profile. So why is that important? When we want to access the best quality medicine, we want something that's full spectrum. So the approach that we take, that we should maybe be mindful to take, is more of a holistic approach rather than a Western approach. And we look at how there's an interaction that takes place. Some people know as the entourage effect. So it's important for us to have more of a focus on what is quality, what creates value, and that's kind of up to the consumers. So one of the important steps necessary is for the consumer to start to ask questions and start to think about what is important to them in their products. So oftentimes when we go to a shop, we're looking for something based upon the looks, or what's the highest THC, but these aren't necessarily the right questions that we should be asking. In Thailand, we have a very kind of unique growing environment with high humidity, and we have roughly 12 hours per light throughout the year. So that means that some strains, oftentimes you'll see that strains being cultivated here more recently are modern polyhybrid strains. Well, these strains have been bred mostly for indoor environments or more controlled environments. So when you move them to an outdoor space, they don't perform well. Why am I saying this? Well, I'm bringing this up because in Thailand, we have a native gene pool of Thai genetics, landrace genetics. And so if we're looking to create something, a sustainable industry here, it's important to utilize what we have available and use those as breeding tools to be able to create varieties that will be acclimated and perform well in Thailand. So this goes to so what my focus on is low-cost farming, and there's different kinds of terms that we're familiar with. Some people maybe are familiar with permaculture, or maybe some people have heard of agroforestry. So permaculture, agroforestry, traditional farming, natural farming, and another one is, well, I guess organic would be the one that people are very familiar with. Organic is good, but I think that it's important to kind of strive for something better. Sometimes as a consumer, we assume that because something is organic, it's good for us. And this is not the case. Just for an example, if you go into like a rim pig and buy organic tomato, that organic tomato maybe look beautiful, but it's grown hydroponically, most likely, and with nutrient salts, and it passes as organic, but it's actually, when you bite into it, it doesn't contain like complexity and sugar content, right? Versus an heirloom kind of tomato that's naturally farmed, from on the mountain, you taste the difference there. And so organic is kind of, it's almost used oftentimes as a marketing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that something is better value or, better for us or higher quality. So it's something that we have to be mindful of. So as a consumer, we have to ask these questions, like what is valuable to us? Because there is a tremendous amount of cannabinoids and terpenes, and if we're focusing on just one aspect of it, we're losing the whole other potential. So when we're talking about sustainability in cannabis farming, this is kind of what my focus is how does this translate? How can you make this a business? Yeah, you can do it on a small scale, but natural farming and organic farming on a large scale can be difficult, right? It can be, but it's very rewarding. So the kind of farming that I practice and educate about is called regenerative farming. And the concepts of regenerative farming are that the productivity of your land actually increases over time. The carbon sequestration of your soil increases over time. The organic matter, the microbial diversity. So your soil becomes your bank, and there's actually trading schemes. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of carbon trading. This is an international way that you can actually, for certain plants, certain trees, you can grow them in specific methods and actually get paid for being carbon neutral, carbon negative rather. So this kind of farming, this opens up potential opportunity for smaller farms or people that don't want to, work with larger investors to look at carbon trading as an option for funding their operations. So regenerative farming, the concept is, is anyone familiar with Raman 9 and sufficiency theory economy? This is something in Thailand that was praised for a long time during the reign of King Raman 9. And this concept is about having 30% rice field, 30% pond, like water source with fish, 30% fruit and vegetable production, and 10% for humans and animal rearing. So this is an example of a closed loop system. The whole idea with regenerative farming is we're using closed loop systems. So the concept here is we look at waste streams, or we look at what is occurring naturally around us, what's native, what's in our area, and we look at how we can utilize those things to lower our production costs, but also to increase our sustainability. So, for instance, one way that I do this is by looking at something called biodynamic accumulators. So all over the world, we have different kinds of plants. For instance, something like that we see as a weed. A weed can grow very, very aggressively, and we cut them, and we don't want them in our garden. However, we can actually ferment those weeds and make a nutrient that is very high in a hormone that will increase the growth of our plants. And what is the cost of that? The cost is just the labor to cut the weeds, and you're clearing your land, and then you're fermenting it. So it's very low maintenance. So the majority of the kind of farming that I do in natural farming is based upon fermenting, anaerobic processes. I do some aerobic processes, but the idea is, you have banana growth, you can utilize different parts of the banana plant. Kind of like the Chinese, I forget what it's called, the signature, in Chinese medicine, they look at different kinds of plants and fruits, and like a walnut, for instance, looks like a brain, so it could be also beneficial. It's believed to be beneficial for your brain. So if you take this kind of concept loosely with plants as well, for instance, if I am in a vegetative state of growth and I want to make a ferment to promote vegetative growth, I can take a plant that I see that's a very quick growing plant And hard is just the tips. The tips are where, the applicable meristems are where the hormones concentrate. So, you can cut the tips, and then you're inducing that plant to have a response of like aggressive growth. So the same thing goes for specific kinds of nutrients, right? Having an understanding and looking to see, okay, this plant that occurs in my backyard, I do a little bit of research and see, okay, it's very high in magnesium. So this could be my magnesium source for that plant. So the idea is, what we are training farmers to do is be able to be self-sufficient and be able to actually take these concepts and scale them up to a larger commercial scale. The idea with regenerative farming at a commercial scale, the switch over is a little bit difficult at first because the initial production is lower than a conventional commercial setup. However, every subsequent harvest, your production costs go down, your quality of product goes up. So from a shareholder perspective, shareholder interest, you're increasing your profits over time. You're lowering your operational costs. And it's something you can feel good about. If you're practicing in this way, you can make all of your nutrients in-house. And by doing that, you can actually offer more jobs within your community. And so this kind of approach, this mindful approach, is something that kind of gets overlooked. But what you'll see, and what's important here, is as we scale up, oftentimes quality goes down with quantity. And so, as we look to find the best deal, the best price, as a consumer, we should be careful that we're not fooling ourselves. Just because we need to have an understanding of what quality is and what we want to benefit from using this plant, how we want to benefit. Because there's many different ways that we can. And I think most of us benefit from using it medicinally, not just recreationally. So there's a certification that's recognized internationally called DEM Pure certification. It's steps above organic. And there's different tenets, principles, which one needs to follow. And this kind of, it's a peer reviewed certification. And we actually have one individual here, our first Thai farmer that's been peer certified. So now we'll have more farms that are peer certified, but the wonderful thing about this system is, some of the concepts are about, again, having, different kinds of animals on your farm and using that closed loop system. One of the things that we also overlook too is, like, in regenerative farming, we always keep the ground covered. We have cover crops. If you have bare soil, it heats up. That microbial population in that topsoil is going to dry out and die. So if we can just mulch and keep our soil covered, just that makes a huge impact. So by using these regenerative principles, we actually drive up the value of our product and drive up also the quality of our product. So what I'm trying to do is kind of introduce these principles and help to educate consumers about what we should be asking for in our medicine and why it's important. Does anyone have any questions?
What do you use as nutrients?
So we make our own soil. We make a living soil mix, and then for nutrients, we use mostly an organic system. So I use just basically fruits and vegetables and herbs and plants and weeds, because I do a little bit of research to find out about the profile, the nutrient profile of those plants, and then I can make kind of a assessment, how I can utilize it in my system. One of the amazing benefits of having an organic system is we have this buffering capacity with the microbes in our soil. And that means that if our pH swings or we feed too heavy, if you make a mistake in a hydroponic system, like your water is too hot or you add too much of a nutrient, the problem will show very quickly and you have a very short amount of time to fix that problem or you can lose your whole product. Organic systems are much more forgiving. They have a buffering capacity that allows you to kind of, like you can see a problem and have a little bit more time to make adjustments. So that's a really wonderful benefit of an organic system. Another thing I should mention too, if you taste, for instance, a hydroponic commercial grow, they grow 10 different strains, but they're growing with nutrient salts, you'll taste an overlying kind of characteristic flavor in these. Their lack of complexity. And they'll be very high in specific cannabinoids, but other cannabinoids won't be present. This is due to the fact that it is essential for specific microbes like Aspergillus and Bacillus species to be in the soil to create specific terpene and cannabinoid synthase genes to be able to create terpenes, specific terpenes and cannabinoids. Meaning that in a hydro system, if you don't have microbes in your soil, which most don't, you will not produce specific terpenes and cannabinoids. They just will not, because the microbes are essential for their creation. So that what happens is we call it a bunch of goofy weed. When we grow warehouses of this hydroponic salt-based flower, it's not complex. It gets you high, but it's like it doesn't give you a creative kind of like uplifting, like opening kind of. It's dull. This is what we need to get away from. So it's on the consumers and all of you to also start asking for more. So I'm happy to speak with any of you guys more. I'm doing a workshop tomorrow. Happy to answer any questions. We make our own soil, we make our own nutrients, and so for me, my goal is not to make a business out of it, but to educate other people so they can do it themselves. So I'm all open source, and I'm happy to share all my information and whatever I've learned over the years, and I hope you guys can benefit from it.
Big round of applause for Mischa.